The crystal behind the bar. I met him in the summer of 1978. Kind of summer where the air hung a little too thick and unmoving over the Mohawk Valley, like the whole region was holding its breath and waiting for something to happen. His name was Daniel, though he told me early on that it wasn't the real name he was born with, just one that had stuck after everything else in his life had been stripped down and reassigned. We met at a little bar in Little Falls called Ed and Bud's, one day over sandwiches introduced through a mutual fishing buddy. The place carried a strange weight to it, something old and stubborn embedded in those walls, like the building remembered things no one else was allowed to. And that's when Daniel showed that kind of presence you don't question right away, quiet but deliberate, like every word had already been rehearsed somewhere else before it reached his mouth. He was smart, well-spoken, well-educated. He was easy to talk to, and we got to talking over cheap drinks, and at some point he asked me a question that felt completely out of place. You ever hear of the Gateway Project? I hadn't, and had no idea what he was talking about. I thought it was a band. He smiled. They pay cash, he said. $500, no paperwork. You sit in a room, meditate, and they measure what your mind can do. And you get a free steak dinner and booze after. Best part, it's all done at Beardslee Castle, that old place that's supposed to be haunted. And no, they're not a band. It's a project, a research project, and we get paid for it. It's one of those things where you gotta know somebody to get in, and so I happen to know this girl who used to work up at the Baseball Hall of Fame. She hooked me up with this thing, and it happens pretty soon, so you interested? In 1978, I'm fresh out of college, and $500 was like winning a lottery ticket, especially if all I had to do was go into a haunted castle and learn how to meditate, I guess, for free booze, free drinks, and $500. So yeah, I said yes before he finished explaining. The instructions came 2 days later. No letterhead or official markings, just a time, a location, and a note that said to come alone. Beardslee Castle is one of those famous landmarks in our area you don't get to go to often, and it's tucked deep into the valley, down winding narrow roads that seemed to narrow the further you drove. I hadn't been there since I was a child with my parents, and it felt so much bigger today than I remembered it. Inside, I stared at the decor that was both weird and old. There were a lot of men in suits, lab coats, and plain clothes. No names and no introductions. It was all business. They handed me a form that said nothing meaningful and everything dangerous at the same time that I signed without even reading. Daniel was already there. He looked different under fluorescent lights, more fragile somehow, like the edges of him had been worn down just a little bit. He was nervous and antsy, and this was the first time I saw him like that, and it made me feel uneasy about him. And looking back on it, I wonder if he was feeling guilty, like he was the sheep leading all the herd to slaughter. You ready? All signed up? You in? He asked. I told him I was, and was excited for a much-needed $500 check to help me move out of my parents' house so I could move to Philadelphia and get my real life started. And that was the last normal decision I remember making. I walked around the castle, admiring all of the old historic pictures, news articles, and architecture. And at one point, I got a chill up my back when a cold gust of wind blew by me and through me at the same time. And I remember being terrified for a brief second as I realized that the wind came from nowhere that logically made sense. But I shook it off quickly and refused to give into ghostly local lore and returned to where Daniel stood. They brought us into a room that felt colder than it should have been, even for an old hotel with stone walls. In the center sat a chair surrounded by equipment that didn't look entirely medical, but also didn't look entirely experimental either. It felt like something in between, like science trying to imitate a ritual it didn't fully understand. And there it was, a quartz crystal mounted in metal housing, wires feeding into it like veins. It wasn't decorative or symbolic, it was the focal point. So immediately, I had to keep my already skeptic mouth shut. We were at a haunted castle and using hippie crystals. $500, steak dinner, and free beer. I just kept repeating that in my mind over and over. Then, one of the men explained in a flat, rehearsed language. The human mind, he said, was capable of reaching beyond the body under the right conditions. Meditation was the key. The crystal was the amplifier. The Gateway Project was the way to understand it. Then he fed us some nationalist bullcrap about doing much-needed work for our country. They called it synchronization of crystal resonance. But they never once told us it was dangerous. The first subject went in ahead of us, a young guy, maybe early 20s, trying to look calm and failing at it in a small, obvious way. They strapped sensors to his head, his chest, his arms, and positioned the crystal just inches from his skull. We were told to observe. Baseline test, the man said. The room went quiet. The subject closed his eyes, breathing slowly, trying to follow whatever instructions they'd given him beforehand. For a moment, nothing happened. Just the hum of the equipment, steady and low. Then, the crystal started to vibrate. Not visibly at first, you felt it before you saw it. It was a pressure building behind your eyes, like the beginning of a headache that hadn't decided how bad it wanted to get. The monitors began to spike. One of the technicians leaned forward, suddenly interested in a way he hadn't been before. "Hold it," he said. "Hold that state." The subject's breathing changed, deeper, slower, like he was sinking into something. And then everything went wrong at once. The vibration intensified, sharp enough now that you could hear it. A high, thin frequency that cut through the room. The subject's body tensed, and then every muscle was locking up as if something inside him had grabbed hold and refused to let go. One of the men shouted to shut it down, but they were too late. Daniel and I looked at each other in terror at that moment, right before something irreversible happened, when the world seemed to hesitate, like it was giving us one last chance to look away. But we didn't, because the sound cracked, then the lights flickered, and a thud-like sound gave way to yelling, screaming, dry heaves, and complete chaos. The sound wasn't loud in the way you'd expect it to be. It was wet, contained, and horrific in a way that made your brain struggle to categorize what you just heard. Because when the generator popped on, and the lights came on with it, the gruesome scene had revealed that the subject's head collapsed in on itself, like the structure holding it together had simply given up and it had blown up inwards. The crystal was still. As the light steadied, the room fell silent. No one screamed or ran. It was now just damage control time, and these guys were pros and on top of it. The men in charge moved quickly, efficiently, like this wasn't the first time they'd seen something like this happen. Just the first time it had gone this bad. We were escorted out within minutes. No explanations, no apologies, no steak dinner, and no free booze. Just silence. But 2 days later, I got paid. $500, exactly as promised, cash in an envelope. But along with the money came a warning. What we saw didn't happen. What we experienced wasn't real. And if we ever spoke about it, there would be consequences that wouldn't stop with us. I saw him once after that night, but Daniel disappeared a couple of weeks after that. No goodbye, nothing. And I haven't seen him since. Not even on the internet or social media. As the years passed by, I've tried to convince myself it had been some kind of hallucination, a trick or stress, and some kind of, hypnotic suggestion, something like that. But then one night, I went back to the castle for dinner with a buddy who was visiting from Los Angeles. It had changed by now, turned into a proper restaurant, polished, presentable, really nice, the kind of place where people came to celebrate anniversaries, weddings, and all that fun stuff, and forget about everything else. I sat at the downstairs bar, ordered a gin and tonic, and waited for my friend. And that's when I saw it. Behind the bottles, set back just enough that most people would miss it, was a piece of quartz, mounted in a small, unassuming place. Faint lines inside of it caught the light in a way that felt familiar. Too familiar. The bartender noticed me staring. "Cool, right?" he said. "Been here forever. Nobody really knows where it came from." I smirked, because I did. Or at least, I thought I did. Because as I looked at it, I felt that same pressure building behind my eyes, that same thin vibration threading its way through my skull, like something on the other side of the bar recognized me as much as I recognized it and was still listening. The chamber. By the time they found me in 1989, I was already looking for something new that didn't have a name yet. I was very serious about transcendental meditation. I'd been studying meditation for years, chasing the promise that if you went deep enough, quiet enough, you could reach a place beyond fear, beyond pain, beyond the limits of your own body. They told me they could help me get there. Vibrations, meta, beta, all sorts of theta waves. The program was framed as research, privately funded, focused on expanding human consciousness. They never said the CIA out loud, but it hung over everything, unspoken and understood, but it paid well. The facility was colder than I expected. It was the old MDS, a once powerful tech company that employed the other half of Herkimer County that wasn't already employed by the Remington Arms gun factory. My grandmother retired from there, and now here I was, buried beneath layers of concrete and societal denial. They walked me through corridors that all looked the same, doors without labels, rooms without context. This thing was filled with lots of sophisticated technology. At the center of it all was the chamber. This thing was filled with wires, all connected to lots of sophisticated technology for the time. I truly had no idea what the hell I was looking at. It was explained to me as a hyperbaric unit, modified beyond anything available to the public, reinforced and wired into systems that monitored everything from brainwaves to blood chemistry in real time. It looked less like medical equipment and more like something designed to contain some sort of reaction in some sort of science fiction horror movie starring Vincent Price. Pressure enhances focus, one of them explained. Combined with the right chemical support, we can guide you into states that would take years to reach naturally. Chemical support, that's what they called it. Clever name for drugs, isn't it? The first dose hit before I even entered the chamber. LSD, they admitted that much, measured and controlled. Later came the MDMA, layered in carefully, meant to soften the edges, to keep me open and receptive. They sealed the chamber and my mind inside of it. The pressure built slowly, a steady tightening around my body, like the world itself was closing in just enough to remind me I was still inside it. At first, it worked exactly the way they promised. My thoughts slowed, my breathing deepened, I felt really good. One with the universe, some would say. They were using theta waves pumped in through speakers, and I could feel them vibrating through my entire body. As I focused on the vibrations, the noise in my head faded until there was only a single, clear thread of awareness stretching out in front of me. Then that started to pull. The chamber dissolved, not visually, not in a way I could describe afterward with any kind of accuracy either. It was more like my sense of location stopped meaning anything. Up, down, inside, outside, all of it flattened into something else. Space grew inside the chamber, and there was no boundary between me, space, time, life, or death. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. And something was there. It was present with such reverence that it felt like it had always been there, and I should feel honored that I have the ability to see it right now. The first forms I recognized were these flower petal-like things that upon concentration and focusing on them, revealed themselves to be wings. They didn't match any anatomy I understood and moved without air, folding and unfolding in slow, deliberate motions, like they were testing the space around them, opening and closing like a mouth. But I could not see what those wings were attached to, but I knew they were attached to something formless, ancient, and forbidden. Then came the others, bodies that looked almost human at a distance until they shifted and revealed the truth underneath. They glowed in the distance, but as they came into view closer to me, I could make out segmented movement and translucent skin that didn't sit right over what it contained. Faces that opened in ways they shouldn't. Like worms crawling inside a perverted human face, a mockery of the human form. Integrated with some force I couldn't see, touch, or smell, but I knew something was threaded through them like a second structure, something that guided their movement from within. I tried to pull back. There was nowhere to go. I wanted out, but the presence around me tightened, like it was curious and aware. I could feel them studying me the way a scientist studies a specimen, probing the edges of my mind, testing reactions, mapping responses. Somewhere, faint and distant, I heard voices, and it was the technicians. "Stay with it," one said. "She's stabilizing." Stabilizing, that's what they called it. The pressure in the chamber increased. So did the clarity of what I was seeing. The winged forms drew closer, their outlines sharpening into something more defined, more intentional. One of them leaned toward me, and I understood without words that it wasn't observing anymore. It was communicating, not in a language, an intrusion. Images flooded it in my mind, too fast to process, too complete to ignore, but a horrific skull-like face with multiple wet, reflective eyes that grasped my mind with its stare. I was frozen and helpless as it walked right through me, passed right through me. I am unsure what to call it. All I know is that at that moment, I could feel its pain, sorrow, and joy all at once. It felt like static electricity charged with an emotional shock and physical effect that straddled painful and orgasmic at the same time. Through my mind flashed landscapes that looked like ours, but stripped down to something raw, primitive, and broken. Structures that rose and collapsed at the same time. People moving through it all with the same wrong, segmented motion, guided by something inside them that wasn't their own minds. Hell on earth, if you need a simple phrase for it. Or some organized system of other dimensional chaos, if you want to know the truth. I screamed, or I thought I did. Inside the chamber, sound had lost its meaning. The connection deepened. Something passed between us once more, and then I was being summoned by reality. I came out in a state of euphoric terror, like I had just seen the most forbidden glimpse into another world that human eyes weren't meant to see. They told me it had been a success. Significant breakthrough, one of them said, like we just achieved something worth celebrating. I asked them what they'd seen, and if they knew what I'd seen. They avoided the question. I asked them what had touched me. They told me I was experiencing residual effects from the compounds. I was all into earning this cash, so I wanted more, and they put me back in the chamber, again and again. Each time, the boundary thinned. Each time, the things on the other side recognized me faster. Then the experiments changed after that. More pressure, different compounds, longer sessions, and some lingering side effects. They started asking specific questions before they sent me under. Can you locate the structures? Can you identify the patterns of movement? Can you determine if they're aware of us observing them? It stopped feeling like exploration and started feeling like surveillance. Everyone was surveilling everyone, including me. Then came the exposure. They told me it was necessary, part of separate lines of research tied into the same program. I never saw what they introduced into the chamber that day, just felt the difference immediately. This was different. It was a sharp, invasive heat, a presence that didn't belong to the visions, something physical that stayed. I felt like it had burned my soul in more of a chemical way than anything else, and then I got sick not long after. At first, it was small things, like fatigue and headaches. I had a persistent ache that settled into my bones and refused to leave. Years later, they gave it a name. Cancer. Aggressive, unusual for someone who didn't smoke, drink, or do any serious drugs. They asked me about my history. I told them everything except the truth, because the truth had already been bought and paid for. They compensated me well, more than the first time, more than enough to build a life that looked normal from the outside. But I guess the mark never left. Even now, as my body starts to shut down piece by piece, I can feel it. That pull, that awareness, the inevitability. Sometimes when the pain gets bad enough, I close my eyes and I'm back in the chamber. The pressure building, the world thinning out around me, and they're there, closer than they were before, waiting, not for me to return, but for whatever part of me they left open to finally give away. And I'm telling you this now because I'm out of time. Because whatever they were trying to reach, whatever they were trying to understand, they got further than they ever should have. I got further than I ever should have. And the worst part about it isn't what I saw, it's what saw me and never stopped wanting me back forever. And now my body is finally ready to go, give it what it wants, whether I want it to or not. One more. We stayed too long after the party ended. Delmonico's had gone quiet, and Don, the guy running the place, was taking care of us. The staff was resetting the room for tomorrow as the smell of steak and butter hung in the air. Utica had gone dark outside the windows. Just the glow of the streetlights and the occasional car sliding past on Genesee Street. It was a retirement party for my buddy George, a longtime co-worker. 40 years in research, which is what they called it out loud, because anything more specific tended to make people uncomfortable. We worked on things none of us could tell other people or talk about in public with anyone who didn't do the same job we did. "Hey Don, one more for us and then we're out, I promise," I said. "No problem, Mr. Scott, I gotcha." Don nodded at us. By the time it was just the two of us left at the bar, the truth of it had already settled in. This wasn't a celebration, it was an ending, and I was happy for George. He was escaping. Or at least, that's what I thought. George was turning his glass slowly in his hand, watching the ice melt. Older now, thinner, with the kind of tired in his eyes he didn't fix with sleep. This was the man who hired me, back when I didn't know enough to ask the right questions. "You ever think about it?" I asked him. He didn't look up. "No," he said. "I worked very hard not to." That was his way. Clean answers, no extra space to wander. Don dropped off our fresh drinks in front of us. I let it stew there between us for a minute, listening to the low hum of the refrigeration units behind the bar, the faint clatter of dishes somewhere in the kitchen. It reminded me of the facility, everything important and everything sounding like background noise. "Herkimer," I said finally. That got George to stop moving. Not much, but just enough. "You told me it was signal amplification," I continued, keeping my voice low, even though there was no one left to hear it. "Consciousness research. Crystal resonance, they called it. Government-funded curiosity. He gave a small nod like he was acknowledging something procedural. "That's what we were told to say," he said. I leaned in a little, feeling that old pressure creeping back behind my eyes just from talking about it. "That's not what it was it?" He closed his eyes for a second. "I know," he said. "You know?" I laughed under my breath. A short, broken thing. "You were running half those sessions." "I was running the part they let me see," George said sullenly. "I quit because of it," I said. "You remember that? Everyone thought I cracked." "They hoped you did," he replied. That was when he finally turned toward me. "You think they didn't notice what you were noticing?" he asked. "You think they didn't build that into the system?" I felt my jaw tighten. "Then why hire me in the first place?" I asked. "I didn't," he said. "They hired you." That sat there for a second. Then he added, quieter now, "I got you out." I stared at him, trying to measure whether he meant that the way it sounded. "You requested my transfer," I said. "I forced it," he corrected me. "Burned whatever credibility I had left to do it." "Why?" He let out a breath, long and tired. "Because you were about to say it out loud." I remembered the monitors, the spikes, the way the subjects would come out of those sessions, different. Even when they smiled, even when they said they felt fine, they were wrong. "I thought we were pushing people deeper, too deep," I said. "Past the body, past the noise." "Well, that's what the chamber did," George said. "That part was real." "And the crystal?" He finally looked me dead in the eye. "The crystal wasn't amplifying anything." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. But he finished it anyway. "It was matching." A slow, careful sip of his drink followed. "Think of it like tuning forks," he continued. "You strike one, the other resonates. Only we weren't just matching frequencies, we were matching states. Patterns of thought, structures of awareness, of reality. We didn't know what we were doing." "We weren't sending people out," I said. "No. We were letting something in," he agreed. His words didn't feel dramatic, they were just clinical, which is sometimes even worse than dramatic, because he had accepted this as fact. "Every subject," he went on, "we thought we were measuring variation, different responses, different outcomes, but when we started overlaying the data, that's when we saw it." He stopped there, like he'd hit the edge of something he still didn't want to touch. "It was the same," I said quietly. He nodded. "Same patterns, same structures, same presence." The memory hit me all at once, the way some of them would hesitate before answering simple questions, the way their eyes tracked things that weren't in the room. "They weren't going deeper," I said. "They were being replaced." "Not all at once," he said. "That's what made it work." I paused. A little at a time, session by session, just enough to stay functional, just enough that no one would shut it down. He said, "And you knew?" "I suspected. Then I confirmed it." "How?" I asked. He gave me a small, humorless smile. "I ran a control. A controlled test, no crystal," he explained. "Same chamber, same protocols, same monitoring. The subject went under clean. No anomalies, no secondary patterns." He swallowed. "Then we reintroduced that damn crystal, and the second signal came back immediately." We sat there in silence for a while after that. Outside, a car passed, headlights dragged across the windows like something was searching us. "So what was it?" I asked eventually. "What were we connecting to?" He shook his head. "I don't think that's the right question." I waited. "I think the better question is, how long has it been waiting for us to build something that could hear it back?" George said, then took a big gulp of his drink. "And the ones who went through," I said, "the subjects that day, they're still out there," he said. living their lives, going to work, talking to their families. He and I both slugged a few gulps of our drinks down. Listening. Don came over again. Hey guys, here's one more. On the house. He gave us shots this time, obviously sensing we needed them. Don took a shot with us. We finished our drinks and headed towards the door. One more thing, I said. He didn't turn. You said you got me out because I was about to say it out loud. Yes. What happens if we say it out loud now? He didn't answer right away. The front door was still open, cold air pushing into the restaurant, carrying that faint smell of the street, exhaust, and damp concrete. Somewhere down the block, a car alarm chirped once and died. Say what? He finally asked, like he needed to hear me define it. The truth, I said. What it actually was, what we were doing. We didn't tell anybody. He gave a small, tired shake of his head. You think it still matters what we call it, what we say? I felt something tighten in my chest. Then what's the risk? You said I was about to say it out loud back then, like that was a problem. Why? He turned to me. Because attention is participation. We weren't just opening a door, we were teaching it how to stay, and it did. He looked down. It doesn't need the chamber anymore. It doesn't need the crystal. That was early stage work, proof of concept. My mouth went dry, but I had to ask, then where is it? He let out a breath that almost sounded like relief. Everywhere, in everything we built, something to carry a signal. I frowned. That's everything. Yes, he said as he stepped onto the sidewalk. It's in the noise, the parts you don't consider consciously register. The compression artifacts in digital video, the frequencies stripped out to save bandwidth, the dead space between signals. Static. It's everywhere. That's not possible, is it? I asked him. It is. It just isn't sound the way we understand it is, or process it, he said. It's structure, it's pattern, something that rides along everything else without needing to be noticed. I thought about every screen I'd looked at just that day, every speaker we listened to tonight, every piece of background noise from a TV I tuned out without thinking. You're saying it's already here. I'm saying it never left once we let it in, he said as a car passed, highlights washing over us, and for a second his face looked hollowed out, like the light had taken something with it when it moved on. And when people notice, I asked, when they start talking about it, he gave that same small, humorless smile. That's the part we misunderstood for a long time, but I saw it. It doesn't spread by hiding, it spreads by being recognized just enough. Kind of like an earworm song is passed on. Like if you hear someone else singing it, you'll start singing it. Like a thought you can unthink, I said. He nodded. Then what happens, I asked. What's it waiting for? He looked out at the street. For enough of us to carry it. For the pattern to stabilize across a population. Cancer doesn't announce itself when it starts. It grows quietly, cell by cell, system by system. By the time you realize what it is, it trailed off. It's already everywhere, I said. And like cancer, when it metastasizes, I asked, hating the word even as I said it. He finally looked back at me. That's when it stops borrowing us and becomes us. I stood there trying to process that, trying to find some way to push it back into something that made sense. So telling people, I said slowly, warning them, that doesn't help? No, he chuckled. Then why tell me? He watched me for a second, something almost like regret passing through his expression. Because you already noticed enough to matter, he said, same as I did. The large street lamp above us buzzed with electricity and flickered. That familiar pressure started to build behind my eyes again, faint but unmistakable. Feel that? He asked. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. He nodded once, like we just confirmed something neither of us wanted to be true. That's all it takes, he said quietly. I looked back at him. And there's no way to stop it? He shook his head. No, he said. There's only a point where we stop being able to tell the difference. He gave me a hug. Thank you for being a good friend all these years. Now do yourself a favor and don't think about it anymore. The chances are slim it will even happen in our lifetime." He smiled, patted me on the back, turned around, and started down the street without another word. I stood there for a second, watching the reflections move across the dark windows of the restaurant, and for a second, I thought I heard something under the noise of the city. I didn't, but I knew it was there, hiding inside the noise of everything I couldn't turn off, and neither can you.
Horror.
You're listening to Nerd Horror Stories, a twice-weekly horror anthology series. No commentary, no long intros, just stories. Stories to fall asleep to, stories to keep you awake, and stories that feel close to home. Please subscribe